Well, I think I'm on a different track a little bit, thinking about the downside of commodification and the downside of tourism as the Castro becomes increasingly a tourist destination. Or it's not even that so much, I think, that I'm worried about as what does it mean for the city and the Visitors Bureau to become increasingly attentive to the fact of the lucrative possibilities of gay tourism. And I you know, I've always been sort of curious about why the Visitors Bureau hadn't invested in gay travel before now, and now that they're investing, I'm a little nervous what's going to happen when they start investing. And you know, so one of the historical questions I have is, how does the city and the city's bureaucracy begin to make civic decisions about an investment in what kind of culture we have here? Is it a tourist culture? And what becomes a tourist attraction? What happens to those cultures when they become a tourist attraction? And I'm currently involved in a research project that's comparing Chinatown to the Fillmore to the Castro. So I'm looking at, does this happen differently at different times in different locations? What happens when a cultural community becomes a tourist destination? How does it transform?
Let me talk about that. Two things. One, the people that come to the Castro with knives and guns are not tourists. They're not people that we market to. I want to make that really clear. They're regional residents. Secondly, we're not marketing the Castro as a tourist destination. We're marketing San Francisco as a destination for LGBT travelers. That's much different. We market San Francisco as a destination to Japanese travelers. We're marketing the same things that we market to all the other visitors to come to San Francisco, stay in our hotels, experience our culture, experience our museums, ride a cable car, see part of our history and our culture. So we're not commodifying the Castro to the gay traveler. We're just saying part of San Francisco's unique culture is our gay history and our gay tolerance and kind of the movement that started here in many cases. That's much different than marketing the Castro as a Disneyland or as a Fisherman's Wharf. We're not doing that at all. We're marketing San Francisco to an LGBT traveler. That's much different.
Ben, you want to say something?
Oh, it was more on the commodity issue. Well, it's not necessarily going at it at what you're talking about. I mean, one in terms of both of your two comments, Joe, and I forgot your name, but I wonder I don't think there's an obvious answer, but both of your concerns in this kind of context, what are the policy or planning implications? And I don't see any planning implications for what you're saying in terms of gays isolating themselves. There's not you can't plan, those are what individual people do in a place. You can't plan anything to make them sort of run out and live in other communities. That's, so I don't, while you're worried about something, and I may or may not agree, it's like, what do you do with that? What do you do with this idea that people either sort of disperse and have a sort of more spread out network, or they have a ghetto, that there isn't unless there's something like the tourist board, deliberately trying to attract non-gay people to move into gay neighborhoods.
We don't attract people.
I'm not suggesting you are. I'm not suggesting you are. I'm just saying.
That's an observation that I was making. We do no planning about where people live. That's not our responsibility. We're talking about kind of how we position a community. That was more of an observation. We do have nothing.
I know. I was making this hypothetical.
Okay.
But I think we're almost missing the point of the question. I guess my read of the point of the question was, number one, how does us being a destination, however that is, travel, people want to live there, et cetera, affect public safety? Mm-hmm. And how do those issues affect the affordability of the neighborhood?
Right.
And, as a DA, I obviously have a lot to say about public safety. I'm happy to talk to you about that offline. But, I think the foot patrols were a step in the right direction. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the end-all and be-all, because from the police reports I read and the victims I talk to every day, there's never enough police. Things just, and, we all, every day I think about what I do and whether or not that makes the Castro safer, my neighborhood safer, and the city safer. And I think we have to look at that critically when we look at what's going to happen with Halloween and how that's what's going to happen next year. And that's obviously something that none of the 5 of us can answer, and frankly, none of the 100 of us in this room can answer. But I think with respect to your issue about making things affordable and keeping things affordable, you know, part of it is trying to make sure that everyone who wants to buy shouldn't reward people who evict. And I think, you know, we don't really talk about that. It's like landowners are evil, tenants are good. But we don't get into like when, because a lot of us become landowners or property owners or whatever the phrase you want to call it.
We have the lowest home ownership rate in the country aside from New York. So,
right. No, yeah,
so we say a lot
70-30.
of us. It's not a lot of us. It's a few of us.
Fair enough, man. I mean, I'm just trying to...
I'm just pointing that out.
No, fair enough. It's 70-30, no doubt. Some of us become homeowners. But, you know, you have to look at it critically and say, how can you get the message across to those of you who do and are lucky enough to make sure that you don't reward that kind of behavior, right? Ellis Act, LMIs, those kinds of things.
But wouldn't you say that's your... I mean, and you as a DA, you're putting the responsibility on the buyers rather than the city and the state and the government.
No, I
because
think
if
I'm
people
just...
are breaking the law, isn't it the city's situation to enforce the law?
That's a civil side, and I do criminal, so it's 2 totally different things. But no, I mean, I deal with people who get pummeled outside of the cafe, and you know, I don't deal with people. You know, Ellis Act, unfortunately, is state law and it is legal. However, we dislike it.
Well, what I'm referring to is we're kind of talking about a history, which I mean, it's kind of like so much. There's so much water under the bridge now. I mean, when I first moved to San Francisco, I actually was born here, strangely enough. I moved back in 1998, and my first month, I knew 7 people who were legally evicted. You know, I had a housewarming party, you know, and from all different, you know, and it was just like, and it was just happening all over the city, and there was no enforcement. So there's this sort of like, what's already happened, and who's already been forced to move. I mean, when I first moved here, I'd walk into the Mission every week or 2, and it was like, wow, a whole new, less Latinos and more, you know, yuppie bars, and by the week. So part of it is what's already happened, and then what can we do from this point? Because the housing stock, I mean, we tore down, you know, the projects and turned them into mixed housing, fewer units. You know, there's so much that's already happened in terms of the kinds of money and people who've moved into neighborhoods that the face of the city is already different.
But it seems like Rebecca is also pointing out that we're here now.
Yeah.
And homeowners and potential homeowners have an ethical, personal stake in buying their piece of the American dream in terms of the choices that they make, and that perhaps there is a way in which we as a community should be putting more pressure or attention toward prospective homeowners and homeowners about the question of how the ethical purchase of a home. Is that, I mean, that's...
Well, I mean, that's part of it. The other thing is, you know, what Supervisor Duffy was saying was there's going to be a lot of development over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And we all need to participate to make sure that there is as much percentage of the new units as affordable as possible.
Right.
And that's what the charrette process is supposed to do, and I'm sure Joe knows a lot more about this than I do, but you know, I just think that if the more we participate and the more we focus on it and we look at viable goals, we can make the neighborhood that much better.
Okay. So in the back, and then we'll go to up here, and then here, and then here, and then there.
Remember that.
I will remember that.
It's kind of a twofold question. Joe, I was curious what you were implying by the mainstreaming of our culture and what that entails, what that means. What part of being gay needs to fall away in order to become mainstream? And then it also ties back in, I think, to something it's Rebecca, correct? You mentioned something about people who come into the Castro, like Jesse Jackson will come to the Castro because showing up in the neighborhood is important to project a gay friendliness to the community. But would Jesse Jackson have come into the Castro, say, in 1977 at the height of the golden sexual gay age of the Castro, or is it in fact something that needed to become mainstreamed in order for these particular people to come and view us as a viable force?